Hi everyone, my name is Vlad. I'm one of the engineering team leads here at Below. Last year, we have decided to investigate the lack of diversity in engineering here in Australia. And as part of our efforts, we decided to launch an iOS Development Academy for women. This academy is completely free and available to any woman who wants to try her hands in iOS development. It's an 8-week-long course where we cover a range of different topics. And also we're running weekly webinars where we invite internal and external presenters to talk about different topics about and around development of mobile applications. This particular session is presented by Kath and Amir. You're about to meet them. The topic of the conversation is accessibility. Amir and Kath are going to talk about the importance of designing applications that are accessible for everyone. This session was too good not to share with the rest of the world, so we decided to upload it to YouTube, and we're thankful for you taking the time to watch it. Without further ado, here is the session.
I first met him maybe 3 years ago at a previous employee, previous time, previous place. And yeah, we got to work for like 3 years together, I reckon. So Amir was head of design at this previous workplace, and he also was a huge advocate for accessibility, heaps of connections in the industry. And basically, anytime there was a design decision around accessibility, or if there was ever a person to push or question, what we could be doing better, that was very much him. And I remember very long conversations in the kitchen around, if one feature should be accessible, if it shouldn't be accessible, and just catching up on that sort of stuff and aligning on best practices. And yeah, for me, like I hadn't done accessibility previous to that. I knew it was a thing. My implementation was, the box basic out of the box, whatever I could get from it is what I would use. And I've learned so much in terms of working with Amir in terms of what is accessibility, what does it actually mean, and how accessibility really relates to everyone. So we've kind of invited Amir today here to talk about accessibility, and to just align on this week's topic of accessibility and answer any questions you have on it. Amir, you can probably give a much better introduction of yourself than I just did. Hopefully I haven't, what's the word I'm looking for? Built it up too much, but look, here's Amir, please take it away.
Yeah, no worries. And look, you just raised something around that discussion around the kitchen. So I'm actually modifying my slide as we speak, because I think it's worth really talking about that one as one of my tips. So let me just do that on the fly as we as we're going. Oh, you've planted a seed there, Luke. I do want to bring that up. So you know what? I'm just gonna move that to another slide.
Sorry.
No. Hey, it's just in time, right? This is how I work, and Kat will attest to my.
I probably should have planted that seed 3 years ago, right? When we were still working.
Right. No, we're done. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, everybody. Apologies. Desktop 2. There we go. Tell me if everybody can see it. Yep. Okay. Right, and present. Well, thanks, Luke. As Luke mentioned, Luke and I worked in a past life together. I've recently just moved to a company called Iris, and I've got one of my designers in my team, Kat or Catherine as well, who will also introduce herself. So just a little bit about me, just so you have some context, and hopefully I can build some credibility about this topic. So I've been in the design industry all my life, coming up to 23 years. And 21 of those has been in the digital space. And I came across the notion of, well, actually, my first foray into accessibility was ergonomics, because I actually studied industrial design. So from a physical perspective, thinking about chairs and entries and height of, setups of furniture and things like that was, one of our topics. But probably about 16 years ago, I came across the notion of accessibility. At that time, I think the WCAG guidelines, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, was, I think, version 1.1 or early days. So it was very early on, and so early that I remember one of our clients, who's a very well-known brand, if I mention them, was in a room as a product manager, and we were discussing, right, how we're going about this project. And I asked the client, I said, okay, so what accessibility standards do you want to meet? AA, single A, triple A? And the individual turned around and said, can you repeat what you just said? And I've just said, yeah, when it comes to accessibility, is your organization, like, do they have a remit? Do you have a certain level of standard that they're trying to meet? He said, sorry, Amir, you need to speak simple terms. I don't know what you're talking about. I said, okay. So people with a disability will be using your product, vision impaired, blind, mobility, etc. There's a set of standards that you potentially have to meet as a semi-government organization. A, AA, or AAA. And I kid you not, this person turned around and said, blind people use computers. And that was my little aha moment of, wow, we've got a huge responsibility to continue to educate. So that was years ago. Moving forward, I've just joined Iris as a global head of design. My remit is to help elevate a design practice, of which Kath sits in across our organization. We build basically we're a fintech company. We build software for the financial services industry. And we're global, so across from Europe, South Africa, Singapore, Australia, Canada, and so forth. So we have a huge responsibility to ensure that everything we build is accessible, even though we're not necessarily a B2C or business to end customer, but we're more of a B2B2C. We provide software for other businesses to then service their customers. So there's a very complex layer. That's me in a nutshell. And Kath, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. So yeah, like Amir said, I work at Iris. I'm a user experience designer there. I've been with Iris for about almost 6 years now, coming up to 6 years. And yeah, like we do software. Everything is complex, and accessibility, I would say, is something that we're still really working hard on, because some of our software is over 10 years old. There's lots of areas where we definitely can improve, but accessibility is something that we try to ensure we build in everything new that we build. So it's a process, as you can imagine. And if you see some of our software, you'd understand. But yeah, I've been a designer for almost 18 years now. I'm from digital design background. So accessibility is interesting for me because at the beginning, like, I used to kind of think, oh gosh, how am I going to, but when you have to consider everything to do with accessibility, if you feel like you're diluting the visual beauty of your design and you have to make compromises. But I think that's where the challenge is. Like, you can still do beautiful design that's accessible. So that's what is interesting about it. And I'm still learning as well. I'm sure I'm still gonna learn heaps from me. I look forward to that. But yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Kath. Right, moving back. So I thought what I'll start is with some stories, and then I'm gonna do a bit of a quiz, and I'm going to actually call you out by name. So I want you to try and have a crack at providing a guess, or you might actually know the answers. But some stories first. So on the left-hand side, you'll hopefully recognize the lift system for big corporate buildings, where instead of actually going to the lift and pressing your level, outside of the lift, you choose the level, and then it directs you to the lift, A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4. A very well-known company in Australia, which I'm sure you'll know, a few years ago, they upgraded their lift system to this sort of format. And again, I don't know the brand of the system or provider they use, but basically you get to the lift well, you select level 31, which, I think that company had in that building, yeah, probably about 30 to 40 levels. And then it'll tell you go to lift A, B, and C. Now, I've got a very good friend of mine. She is legally blind, so she has a guide dog. She works at this company. She used to come in, press just single button to open up the lift, listen for the ding so she knew which lift it was. She would go, use the braille on the button to go, right, I want to go to level 31. Bang, she would go. She rocks up one day and she's told that, yep, there's a new lift system. So, yep, and it's fully accessible. You won't have any problems. She goes, okay. She rocks up with her guide dog, gets to a device like this, and she gets someone to tell her, well, yep, through feel and touch, get to here, and it's all touch screen. So obviously she can't feel the touch screen because she doesn't know what she's looking at. And then someone says, oh no, there's an accessibility button at the very top. You press that and you're off you go. So this is how this feature worked at the time. Let's say you wanted to go to level 31. You press that button once, and now you're in accessibility mode. The instructions tells you, press this button the number of times equivalent to the floor number you want to go to. So she now has to go 1, 2, 3, 4, I'll be right there, 5, 6, 7, 8, shush dog, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, etc., etc., etc. People are waiting behind her. There was only 2 this type of device or control. Now, think about all the distractions, the stress of keeping people behind her waiting. An added bonus, in that building, level 27, I think, you can't stop at, right? So she's got up to what she can in her head, it was 31, but she's now at 32. So what does she have to do? Start all over again. Press it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Make sure she can hear. Now, in the light of, the Disability and Discrimination Act, this system is accessible. They've provided a way for her to be able to get to her floor. Now, is that a great experience? What do you think? If you're in that, if you're in her shoes, having to press that 30 times plus the additional button to get into that mode is not good design, is it? Okay, it's not inclusive. So that's one example. The middle one, I was in the train and had to go to a very important client meeting, probably a few years back only. And my boss at the time said, Amir, you have to listen to this video before this meeting. It's imperative that you do so. I'm going, okay. I jumped to listen to the video and I realized I actually didn't have my AirPods or my earphones with me. Now, this is the video was actually on YouTube or some mainstream platform. My train, I can tell you, was 10 times as busy as this photo that you see on the screen. There's no way in hell I'm going to put my phone into loudspeaker, listen to potentially confidential video while jam-packed like this in a train. Okay, so I couldn't consume that video. Easily, it could have been fixed if that video had captions, so I could actually read it, or transcripts, but it didn't. Right, simple stuff. And the third one, we had a colleague who had tennis elbow or RSI or carpal tunnel syndrome, quite serious, to the point that her physicians had told her she shouldn't use a mouse, or she should use her left hand, or use keyboard only for a while. So you use the fingers, but potentially not move around. Now, I don't know how many of you guys have tried to put away your mouse and trying to use your computer, Chrome, Safari, browsers, and apps purely using keyboard. I highly recommend you have a crack at it. When we get off the phone, this is one of the activities I would get you guys to do. Try with keyboard only, send an email to Luke or to one of your fellow people in this, and let's see how well you go. I can tell you it's going to be very hard. Okay, that's your homework. Keyboard only, email to Luke. And you got to insert an emoji in the email. Okay. So that's some stories to share with you. Now, this is from Microsoft. So ironically, Microsoft builds reasonably average products, but when it comes to accessibility and inclusion, they're pretty, they do a pretty good job. This comes as part of the Microsoft Inclusive Toolkit, and you can find it. It's a PDF. The reason I wanted to put this screenshot up is because it really presses the fact that accessibility is not about disability. Okay, it's not someone in a wheelchair. It's not someone with a guide dog. It could be a mother holding a child in her arms. Could be someone who's about to go have a cataracts operation. Could be someone who's got an ear infection or is working at a bar. So whenever we talk about, accessibility, just think to yourself, it could be permanent, it could be temporary, or it could be situational. Perfect example for me in that train was I had a situational disability. I couldn't listen. I've got near perfect hearing. I've got some hearing loss, but I couldn't listen at that point in time. Or my mum was going through a cataracts operation, so for a while she had quite blurry vision. But afterwards she was fine. Or someone who's blind or deaf or nonverbal or is on the spectrum. Okay, so when you add all this up, you could pretty much say you'll know someone in your daily life who experiences or sits within this persona every single day. And if you guys are responsible for building applications for general masses or a niche market, it doesn't matter. You need to think about everybody. So that's really important. That's probably the key takeaway for you. If you have to go away today, is to be open-minded to ensure that you're designing and building your products for as many people as possible. And we term that universal design. Designing for universality, designing for everybody. Now, some quizzes. Now, before I want to make sure I don't embarrass myself with some pronunciation of names. So we've got Pia. I can see Pia. Lorene, is that correct? Loren, okay. Jorans or Yorans? Jay, Jorans?
Jorans, yeah.
Jorans. Adina or Adina? Adina.
Yeah.
Paulina, great. Queenie and Gar. Well, I don't know if that's capital A's. Can you help me with your name?
Yeah, Garima.
Garima. Beautiful. That's a vote.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Okay. So I've got a text-to-speech recording of an app, which I'm going to play in a second. I want you to tell me how much you think the product is and how much energy this particular product has. Okay? So how much and what's the energy? Now, hopefully you can hear the audio.
WTF tenders $12 to 300 kJ.
So the product is called WTF tenders. So what the beep tenders, that's what they've called the product. Okay, but I'll play it again. Hello.
WTF tenders $12 to 300 kJ.
Okay. Pia, how much is the WF tenders?
$12.
$12. Okay. Paulina, how much? Not sure Paulina is there.
Yeah, I'm here. Okay, so I heard just a 300 or something like that.
Okay. Loren, how much was the dollars?
$12, and I think it said 2 because kilojoules is represented in with the comma between the thousands.
Okay, now you've been a smarty pants. So this is how it's displayed, but the screen reads $12 to, take a breath, 300 kg. So the sheer fact that the pause, so people were like, I thought it was $12.02, 300 kilojoules, and also kj. So someone may not understand what kj actually means. So they could have easily, called it as kilojoules. Okay. You get a prize, Lorraine, and I don't know, Luke can give you something. Next one. This is from Google, not Google Statistics, Google
Trends.
Google Trends, thank you very much. This is from Google Trends. Sports activity of the last week, what people have searched for. What's wrong with this picture? I'm going to call that Queenie.
I couldn't compare like some of the
data is so close to each other, and maybe someone who's not great with color or colorblind, they can't tell which one is which.
Okay, Jorings, what do you think?
And I think they use too many similar color. For example, the blue and the green color, they comes together, plus the color is pretty similar. And yeah, and also some color issues like green and red, they don't compare with each other. So yeah.
Yeah, all good. You guys have done your homework. So imagine if you were colorblind. And it's ironic. Actually, no, I'm gonna talk about it after this one. But yes, if you were colorblind, and obviously this is a pure extreme where you can't see any form of color, this graph would be pretty much useless to you, right? And we're talking Google Trends. Google, of all people, of all companies, you think they would have done a better job. All right. What is the proportion of men who have some form of color blindness? Is it 1 in 12? Is it 1 in 23? Or is it 1 in 500? I'm going to ask Adina.
I don't actually know at all.
Best guess.
A.
Okay. Vlad? You can play along.
I think it's an A. Yeah, I think it's quite high.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's A.
Oh, jeez. You guys, I need to come up with tougher quizzes next time. Just think about it, right? 1 in 12 men have some form of color blindness. And if you think about the number, unfortunately, the society we live in, a lot of men sit in executive positions, right? And as part of that executive position, they often get what we call traffic light reports, right? The status of how we're going in business, commercially, financially, all that sort of stuff, right? And often green, red, amber reports are very common. And the red-green color blindness is the most common of that. So think about the number of execs who sit there and go, I have no idea how to do my business or do my job because I can't actually understand the report. So yeah, relying on color alone is a huge mistake. Next one. Fact. Around 5.1 million Australians, or 30%, aged 18 years and over, report having a disability or long-term health condition. Is it true or false? I'm going to go with Paulina.
I guess it might be true.
Okay. Luke.
I don't know if false. I reckon it could be more, but that's just my guess.
Okay. Lorraine?
Oh, I should know this. Over 18. What's 1 in 5? I'm bad at math. Around about that is about right, I think.
Well, the one in 5 or the 20% is another fact. 20% of the world population have some form of disability. But this is a specific one from Australia. And look, the data is pretty old, 2010. That's all I could actually find from the Bureau of Statistics. But
yeah, just full disclosure, I work in web accessibility.
Well, there you go. So, well, hang on, you get off the call then.
Sorry, I'm really enjoying this though. Thank you so much.
Okay. Right, huge numbers, people. Right, we're not just talking the outlier customers, right? Or one in, I don't know what products you're building, but if it's for general public, that's a huge number of people who identify themselves with having some form of disability or health condition, which means when it comes to using digital products, they could be impacted, right? So this is not small stuff. This is not small numbers. It's extremely important. I think this is the last quiz. Which of the following companies have had lawsuits against them for not providing accessible services? Now, Lauren, you can shush. Queenie, thoughts? Just pick the names.
Burger King?
Okay.
It's a random guess. I have no idea.
Okay. Pia?
Netflix.
Okay.
That's all.
Yeah. Queenie?
Did you just call me earlier the first time?
Which of these companies do you think have had lawsuits against them for not providing accessible services?
Well, I guess it's Burger King earlier, but maybe, well, I'm going to stay with that answer for now.
Okay,
Oh, wow.
that's a small list. And these are big companies, obviously, and hence people can go for them and target them, right? But we're not immune to people, zealous people, especially in the US, but there have been many examples in Australia where Coles, perfect most recent one, they've gone through a very expensive lawsuit simply for someone not even doing a basic check on their website for them to be able to do some standard online shopping. So their human rights have been removed. Right? They wanted to shop at Coles. They wanted to go to the Sydney Olympic. They couldn't purchase tickets online. Okay, so it can get serious. Okay, I thought maybe I can get Kat to spend a couple of minutes and talk about sort of the complexities at Iris as well, and you know, the type of products that we build and where we are in terms of our accessibility journey. So Kat, take it away.
Okay. Where do I start? As I said earlier, we have really complex software, mostly desktop apps, some of them mobile, and it's a long journey. And one of the play areas that I work with at Iris is with the design system. So that's where we can really sort of work at scale on pushing accessibility forward. So, and like I said before, any new areas that we work on, try to make sure it's accessible. And so with the design system, if that would make sure that on the basic level, our components are accessible, we look at the typical things like color contrast, and like the color contrast is one thing, and also color choices for the different things that we look at. And charts is definitely one area that we have to make sure it's easy to read, and other ways to represent the lines would be, you know, to use different patterns and different symbols, so things like that. And
Use of fonts.
yeah, use of fonts. So one of the things here is obviously numbers is a big thing. And when we first looked at what fonts to use for the design system, we looked at all the really typical fonts that are, you know, tried and tested. But when we tested them with the numbers, you'd be surprised that, you know, a lot of them didn't actually pass what we needed the numbers to look like, especially when in the context of something like this screen here, where it's there's a lot of numbers on the screen and it's in small spaces, and some of the numbers that we tested out with other fonts, you know, they might have the 9, for example, is sitting below the, so you got like different up and downs, and it's just getting too busy, and spacing between the numbers. We need to make sure that our ones look like ones and not I's or L's. Need to be easily differentiate those things, like, and zeros with O's. So even though a lot of the time the numbers might exist as numbers by themselves, there are times where, you know, in context, like there are areas where we do have text, it's not just numbers. It just needs to be easily readable. And it's an example of where accessibility is not just for people with disability, it's making it easy for everyone to read, and to quickly absorb the numbers. And things that we need to consider, for example, with tables, are just being able to read easily across the lines. So having lines between each row was a consideration. And yeah, it's actually an option that we allow users to choose if they want to switch it off. But if it's off, then we have the zebra option of, you know, alternate color backgrounds. Yeah, so.
Thanks, Kat. Yeah, so obviously you guys are all learning to, you know, design apps, you know, iOS Academy. But rest assured, you know, you might work in your next job, your next lifetime, in an organization where it's not about apps, but it's about, you know, ginormous screens with a lot of complex information. So, you know, it's about the complexity of designing for, I guess, bigger, what do you call it, display sizes, and or designing for web, and considering that someone potentially, if they're vision impaired and has to be very close to the screen, or they'll have screen readers on, just think about the order in which this table needs to be consumed. Now, someone might say, well, hang on a second, a blind person, a vision impaired person wouldn't be sitting and doing this, you know, using the screen. Well, that's probably an extremely negative view of, or like having a very closed mindset around, well, who's abled and who's, you know, who's worthy of having a job working at Iris. So it just, you know, we're definitely early on our journey. We've got very complex products, but as Kath said, you know, we use a design system to do some initial stuff in that, you know, we design it to be accessible, but we still got a long way to go, because at the end of the day, the engineer would pick up our design components, design systems, and the code, but the level of, you know, responsibility from the engineer is to ensure that, well, whatever they code is still accessible, right? So it's not just visual, it's the markup and things like that. So I wanted to show how many.
Just Amir.
Yeah.
Before we move on, we have a question in chat.
Sure,
Queenie
yes.
is asking. Yeah, Queenie is asking. The font tip is great, thank you. Could I understand a bit more about alternative accessible design of table without the lines? Queenie has missed that part.
Sure. I think, Kat, you were talking about zebra stripes or changing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main options we have, like just zebra stripes. But that's the most accessible is the lines, because zebra stripes usually it's quite a light color, and that's still a color issue. So when you go darker and darker, that starts to become messier and messier. And then this is actually a simple table that's shown here. There's other tables where you're expanding multiple layers of like just content under each section, and then you need to be able to filter through. You can see that there's like each column has a filter level, so the complexities can get quite tough. But yeah, lines, we fall back on lines because it's simple. It might look busy, and that's where like one of the things we have to consider, where we used to think that adding these lines make it look busier and less attractive. Like we want to make things simple and clear as a designer, but accessibility definitely tops the market. Like you need to choose the more important thing. Yeah.
And do people know what we mean by zebra striping? Basically, zebra striping is when you've got tabular information or rows of information, you alternate the background color of each row. So gray, white, white, to allow someone to be able to sort of track, especially for a complex table with lots of columns, to know 5 columns to the right that is associated with this group. And then that white color again, it's just some sort of visual cueing to allow people to be able to read tables easier. But as Kat said, the gradient you use or the color you use for the background can then have a negative impact in terms of then the text that sits over the top. So it's a hard one to solve for. Can you put your hand up if any of you guys have experienced or turned on VoiceOver on your iPhone? I can't see Paulina, Quinny, or Adena, but so Pia hasn't, Jorans hasn't, Lauren has. Quinny and Paulina, Adena, have you guys, do you know what VoiceOver is, or have you used it or turned it on?
No.
So that's your homework number 2. But I'm not going to be here to check if you've done your homework, so I just hope you do. So one of the most probably popular and important features of the iPhone or the iOS operating system is the VoiceOver, which is basically text-to-speech. It's used for people with vision impairment or who are fully blind. What I thought I could do is I'm going to play this video. And excuse me, I've been following the Euro 2020, hence all the soccer results on the right. I'm just going to play this video for you. Hopefully you can hear it. For the video.
See, I'm just showing a little video of how a blind person would use an iPhone. So basically, You go to, you run your finger along the screen and you find what you're looking for. And there's like a little bit of a vibration, so it helps too. And it reads everything on the screen.
First thing, have you noticed the speed at which she's got playback for the voiceover? So if you notice someone who's blind using the voiceover or talkback on the Android, which is equivalent, the sense of hearing is much better. And often they will have, I guess, the reading speed at close to 2 or 2.5 times what you and I would comprehend. So this is actually slower. I've got friends who actually have the setting even faster.
Screen as you're going. And so then I open Twitter.
Vertical scroll bar. 46, 36, 26, 66,
and it's at the top of the Twitter page now.
Compose tweet.
And I'm gonna compose a tweet.
This is my favorite bit.
And normally you would use the regular keyboard here, but the iPhone also has this other keyboard where when you turn it, now I can braille and use a braille keyboard. So
apostrophe M space REATING space A space TWEET.
This blows my mind. I don't know about you.
NOW period. Now space dot sig cap I space LOE space ING space M1 space I cap AONE period iPhone.
And so
portrait.
Then I can read what I wrote.
Cap G. Using my iPhone. Voice recording. Text field is editing. I'm creating a tweet right now. I love using my iPhone. Character mode. Insertion point at end.
So I could share that if I want. But that's pretty much the idea.
Twitter.
And so you double tap on anything to open it.
Doc. Messages. Safari.
And it'll bring up whatever. So basically it just reads whatever is on my screen and then I can interact with it and double tap or a triple tap or scroll using 3 fingers up and down.
Next button. Address. Google.com. Address. Delete. Selection deleted. HTTPS Braille screen input. Or BLOGFPOT period. OM. Portrait. Go. Go. Next button. Address. Logger.com. Secure and validated connection. 1392. Read more. Link.
Anyway, so that's just one example of someone who's fully blind using their phone. So just think of it as it's your responsibility when you're building iOS apps that you need to be familiar with this type of feature and then test your product and test your app as you're building to ensure that someone who's using such a technology can actually use it. I had most recently I did I was a sort of a mentor judge for a hackathon for Australian spinal muscular atrophy. So these are people who have SMA, which means they often can't use their hands. Their spine is quite deformed. They're often in a wheelchair. This one individual had she basically got a chopstick, modified the tip so the capacitor on their phone would recognize it. She would have her phone standing on a stand and she would use her mouth with a chopstick to navigate through her phone. Now imagine if the app that she was using had buttons or tappable areas or touch targets that were really small, right? It would be an absolute nightmare. So unfortunately, I can't share you that video for privacy reasons. So, so we watched that video. And I just thought I'd, as I got off the phone with Luke, I thought, well, maybe I'll come up with some most recent examples that I've experienced around poor accessibility. I'll somebody call that out. What do you think is going to happen if I make the text site as big as possible? Pia.
Not sure, maybe break the UI.
In what way?
Because the per item, it's already too crowded. So when the text size is put into the largest one, then maybe it has no space for it, to accommodate the larger text size.
Okay. Do you want to see what happens?
Yes, please.
I'll do it again. Before, after. Basically, it does nothing. So for someone who's vision impaired and wants to increase the text size, who already struggle with the information on the right, KFC has built it and designed it in such a way that totally ignores the basic accessibility function that comes out of the operating system, which is probably one of the biggest no-nos when you're building native applications, right? You want to build it with as much nativity, which is probably not a word, but I've just made it up, from a font perspective or just the way it's been built so that you can rely on the operating system doing all the hard work for you. So this is pretty dismal. That's just two examples. I had so much list, I thought we were going to run out of time, so I haven't shared everything with you. Now, this is the slide that I broke because I was doing it on the fly as we spoke, but I thought I'd give you some tips. Start with the last one. The last one being, work with your colleagues when you're making design decisions or around accessibility. Perfect example is, to Luke's point, we were working with an airlines client, or no, was it Dreamlab? Was it Dreamlab? Okay, it was Dreamlab. So
I think it was Dreamlab, yeah.
Yeah. Basically, Dreamlab, it's an app. It came with a client, which is in telecommunication business, had a logo, right? In one of the screens, the logo, which was quite small, was visually apparent. Now, there was a conversation that Luke was having with one of the designers in that, should the text-to-speech function, voiceover and talkback, read out that logo, or should they skip it? Now, the conversation got a little bit heated, but it was a great conversation because the idea behind reading images is that only if it communicates something worth communicating. And the conversation was, well, hang on, if I'm trying to do something and there's just the logo of the organization there, is that adding value? Does that change my behavior, change what I'm about to do? If it doesn't, we should skip. Or if it does, we should keep it. And so there was a really interesting conversation. And even though it might have come across heated, but what it allowed, it's better to have had a conversation, not to have it and just make assumptions. So that was a really good conversation, I remember. Another one, color contrast. I don't know how many of you guys, when you're building applications, or unless you're working with designers, have color contrast checkers. So this is just one of many tools that you can download for Mac or Windows. It's just floats. You can have it on your screen. You've got color pickers. You can pick your foreground color, which is often the text, background color, and then you can check if it's meeting AA, AAA standards. And it's got a bunch of other features and functionality. If you don't have this tool, another homework, go and install that on your machine. Something funky going on here. Text to speech. Ignore this. Sorry, that's the thing I was adding before. Don't just become familiar with things like text-to-speech. Become an expert at all the accessibility features on your device or the operating system that you're building for. From Zoom, magnification, transcripts and captioning, voiceover or text-to-speech functionality, you need to become an expert. Okay, I'll be honest with you, it's not good enough if I'm hiring someone as an engineer or even a designer, and depending on their level, if they tell me they've never turned on voiceover or they don't know anything about the Apple's, operating system accessibility features, for me, that already throws you towards the bottom of the list. So become an expert, okay? Understand who you're building for and understand what powerful tools come from the phone that you can just rely on. Next one, just regarding fonts. We had a lot of experiences with fonts back at, again, a previous company where, for whatever reason, we chose not to use native fonts. Sure, it looked great on the screen, but when it came to things like dynamic text sizing, increasing text sizes, they would break. They just wouldn't render as well. And the reason, for example, Apple recommends San Francisco, for example, as a native font is because it's been tried and tested. They've rendered it under all sorts of conditions to make sure that it's going to work. So if you've got a brand for a company, like if you want to use a different font, just use it sparingly. Use it for a big heading or use it for perhaps as the title of the page. Make sure there's lots of spaces on the other side. But where possible, go with native. Go with native components, go with native fonts, and makes your life much easier. Because you can't control what users got what accessibility feature turned on. You can't demand, right? If they want to increase the text size or magnification, they will. And if your app breaks, there goes the functionality, there goes the brand, that's associated with what you're building. as you noticed before, tab and read orders, right? Another example, do we have time? How are we going for time? Got 10 minutes, Luke?
Yeah, 10 minutes. As long as we leave some time for questions, should be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. This is pretty much the last slide. We were working for an airlines company, and we were building a feature set where you've got to like you booked a flight from Melbourne to Brisbane, going from like at 9 a.m. arriving at 11. But often, as you know, with airlines, they get delayed. And so we were designing the screen as how it would look when there's a delay, the flight delayed. So instead of 9 to 11, it was going to go at 9:15, arriving at 11:15. The designer made sure that it was designed to be accessible, padding, color, contrast, all that sort of stuff. Developer had built it. Now, what happened was, it was in a card design. The way the talkback or voiceover read the screen was, now, in case you don't know, the shorthand for airline and airports are like MEL for Melbourne, BRS, or BRIS for BRI, actually, for Brisbane. So it was reading, scheduled flight, 9 a.m., MEL, 11 a.m., BRIS, delayed, 9:15 a.m., 11:15 something. And it was very, in fact, I'm not sure even if that was the order. It was, if you close your eyes and try to listen, you had no idea what was going on. And the only way we managed to find that out is we actually did some usability testing, and someone came in and did the voiceover and go, oh, this is absolutely broken. So we're back to the drawing board, and the developers were great that they could actually redesign, visually look the same, but redesign the way it was read, because the way they built it, that said, your upcoming flight is due at 9 a.m., arriving at 11 a.m. has been delayed. Your departure is now at 9:15 a.m. from, to 11:15 a.m., going from Melbourne to Brisbane, right? So you can override what's on the screen with what you want, your text-to-speech to read out. So, but getting your order of the content on your screen becomes really important. Second last one, if you haven't already, I highly recommend Funkify. Where is it? It's a Chrome extension. And what it does, it helps mimic different disabilities. By default, the free version comes with a bunch, and then you can sort of pay it and get the rest. So for example, dyslexia Danny, this is what they would experience if they were dyslexic. I don't know if you can see on my screen behind, the text are constantly being moved around. Or here's Color Carl with various different types of color blindness. At the moment, they're all sort of, you got to pay for it, that's okay. Or for example, Blurry Bianca. So it's a really, really great tool. If you don't know anybody who has a disability, Funkify, I highly recommend. It's a great way where, especially if you've got your iOS emulator or iPhone emulator on your screen, you can turn this on and you can get a sense of what it might be like. Anyway, it's a great tool. And then the last one, it's probably the most important one. Oh, for some reason, it sort of cacked it. You're not your end user, right? Test with people of all different shapes and sizes and walks of life. Okay, because that's often where you find your majority of usability issues. You test your app with 2 people who are blind, you'll be amazed at how differently they'll use that application. So the best way to ensure you're designing for everybody is to test it with as many different people as possible. And just to wrap it up, so we've got some time for questions. This is probably my all-time favorite quote. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. From Maya Angelou. And it's on the homepage of Apps for All, which I think Luke has shared with you, which is a website that I helped found. Basically what this is saying, or what I mean by this, is that you're never going to get accessibility perfect. Okay, it's impossible, right? You got 7 billion people who experience things in different ways. But if you want to get it perfect before you release something, you'll never get it done. So treat accessibility as this notion of good, better, best. Start somewhere. Start with touch targets. Start with your font. Start with your color. Start with your tab order. Get that right. If you've got time, if you've got budget, do the next thing, do the next thing. And slowly try and achieve, the better and the best. Okay? But just start somewhere. because it's better than not doing anything at all. I'll shut up now. I thought I'd leave some time for questions. This is where I'll stop talking and you guys ask. Don't be shy.
Okay, I'm going to jump in and ask a question. So I was quite interested in the tool. Like I have no prior understanding of accessibility, and this is the first time. It's really eye-opening. Thank you. So when I saw the Funkify tool that you do the simulation. So now I realize there's a problem how the user may see something different to us or some of us. What do you go from there? Like, how did you solve, say, the problem of blurry or dyslexia, or like, what's the next step?
Yeah, it's a good question, Quinny. So I would say, like, if you go to Apps for All, just start with the basics, right? You're not going to necessarily solve the problem for someone who's got cataracts or blurry eyes and so forth. But if you just start with the basics, which is following the human interface guidelines from Apple, get your touch targets right. Make sure you've got the 44 pixel by 44, right? Make sure the minimum, if you can make it bigger, make it bigger. Make sure you've got your color contrast right. Make sure you're not purely relying on color to convey information. Limit the number of custom components you're building. Make sure, for example, your images have, labels, or in fact, anything that's tappable has a label. If it's a button, make sure it says button. If it's an image, it says it's an image or a link or so forth. Just do those basics to begin with, Kinney, as opposed to trying to go, right, how do I solve for someone who's got cataracts, who's blurred? By sheer nature of doing the basics, you're probably going to help someone who's potentially got blurry vision still be able to read, because they can turn on VoiceOver, they can magnify their screen, so at least they can still see the text even if it's blurry, right? And this is why some of those basic standards exist, because what they've tried to do is go, right, if you get these right, you're going to try and service the majority of the population who have some form of disability. So my tip would be just start with the basics. The Funkify was just as a way for people that I showed, for people to build empathy about what it's like to be dyslexic or neurodiverse or have blurry vision or be colorblind, which is more of an aha moment. The fact that you guys are in this classroom already suggests that you already appreciate and understand its importance. So it's more of a novelty feature, but definitely just start with the basics. Anybody else? One more question, come on, 2 minutes. Okay. Cool. Luke and Vlad, I'll leave it to you. What I had to close up.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. That was super insightful. I've learned what zebra stripes are. I never knew it was called that. Don't think that's the only thing I took away from this talk, but I definitely learned that. So that was really cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. I will add, like, what we've touched on tonight has obviously been, like, I wouldn't even say 1% of the accessibility world, right? If you go into, like, if you leave tonight and go to, your iPhone, go to settings, go to accessibility, have a look at everything there. There's so many options. There's options that can turn off your iPhone screen and you can use it without a screen being on. Like, there is way too many options that I could possibly mention in this video. And yeah, just know that, like, there's so many different ways to personalize your phone. And I don't know them all. I'm pretty sure Amir doesn't know them all. Like, it's something that, every year there's new features, and it's really important that we revise these features and we keep learning on these features going forward. And yeah, do good, better, best in accessibility. And I would encourage you to take a look at the projects you're working on, and take a look at, turn on VoiceOver on your project and see, does it work? Do I need to modify some components here or there? Maybe try and use it with your eyes closed to put yourself in a different mindset. So many different things you can do, and it's the world's your oyster, right? It's just a starting point for your accessibility journey, and you can't go wrong. Like, as long as you're trying, can't go wrong.
Probably,
yes.
If you decide to turn on your VoiceOver on your phone, a big piece of advice: before you turn it on, go and turn on the shortcut for accessibility first. The reason is, once you turn on VoiceOver, then you have to know the gestures to be able to navigate through your phone. And if you don't know those gestures, you will forever be in VoiceOver mode. And it can be very stressful for people. And I've seen them firsthand that they get panicked. They go, oh, I'm about to go to a meeting. I need to use my phone. So turn on the shortcut, and then you can turn on voiceover. So you've got a backup way to quickly turn it off. That's my only tip regarding voiceover.
Cool. All right. Well, look, yeah, Amir, Kath, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm sure it's been super insightful for everyone. I hope we've all learned a lot here, and I'm sure we have. And I look forward to getting a lot of emails that make no sense to me in my email.
Keyboard
inbox.
only.
Vlad, do you have anything you want to chime in with?
Amir and Catherine, thank you so very much. I think passion is obviously clearly what you have, and thank you so much for spreading it. And it's always very exciting to see somebody who is that passionate about making a difference. Thank you so very much. It's been very, very insightful and exciting.
Good luck, team, and feel free to reach out to Catherine and myself via LinkedIn, or if you've got any other questions, you can go through Luke or do whatever. We're open to connect and help out as much as we can. And all the best with your the next 5 weeks, I think.
Yeah, perfect. All right, thank you so much. Have a great Tuesday night, everyone, and we'll speak soon.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.